I'm sitting there hitting all of these buttons. Nothing's happening. Just log out and log back in again. There we go.
There you go.
Perfect. I'm sorry. I hope you weren't waiting long.
Nope, not at all.
All right. I'm going to turn you up. Oh, we are. I need the nice wood backdrop. That looks nice.
Well, and you've got the river nearby you, I suppose, so we're even.
Yeah. This poster is ages old, and we had to haul it every time we did a thing, so this is much easier. I just pop it up, and there's a huge mess behind there. You wouldn't even know.
Very good. Okay, I guess before we start, I wanted to say that obviously this isn't live, so if we'd like to start again, that's totally welcome. I've got time for that if you'd like.
Right.
And I'll move through some general questions about how the reading series got started, what makes for a good reading, what, from the perspective of an organizer, makes a writer easier or more difficult to work with. The easiest part of organizing, most challenging, a word about land acknowledgements in your position as a host. And then what the transition online has been, and upcoming events. So that will, I think, bring us to about the 20-minute mark. I'm noticing now that I've just gone fuzzy.
Oh, that's all right. There's something in the air.
There might be.
And yeah, okay, that's clear. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, just need to get a bit closer.
There you go.
Okay. So, welcome to episode 2 of Talking with the Organizers, presented by Antler River Poetry, formerly Poetry London, this week featuring By the River reading series with board president Emily Lockhart. Emily, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
So, By the River reading series, situated in Wawayutanong and begun in 2015, has featured 44 writers through 5 seasons, with 17 writers slated for your 6th season, if I'm not mistaken. And I wonder what the impetus for beginning the series was back in 2015, and whether that has changed at all over the past 5 seasons. Have there been discoveries along the way?
Okay, so how we started was we were kind of the new kids on the block. We had just moved from Indianapolis, Indiana, to Windsor, and I thought a great way to kind of introduce ourselves to the scene was to just ask a bunch of people to come out and join us for a reading. So in Windsor, Wawayutanong, we found that there were 9 presses in just the city of Windsor. And so we, one of them, Urban Farmhouse Press, just invited everybody to come, and just kind of ended up networking that way. And it grew from there.
And I noticed that in addition to Urban Farmhouse Press, you're often in collaboration with Women's Feminist Theatre in Windsor. And I wonder if you'd say a few words about that collaboration.
Yeah. So Patricia Fell is a friend of ours, and she organizes a program called Stone and Sky. And she collaborates with a visual artist, a writer, and a musician. And they meet during the summer. And so we, out on Pelee Island, kind of joined her, and ended up finding that we have a lot in common. So, yeah, we just joined them. And then the Windsor Feminist Theatre is also a theater company, so they do small plays around Windsor as well.
Great. And was it a regular or steady location from which you'd have the readings before the pandemic took place, or did you move from one location to another?
Yeah, that's always been kind of our tough one. So we originally started as a library program. So we worked with public library, and from there decided to kind of do our own thing. And we've spotted around a few different organizations, but that's part of the collaboration. So when you join, venture out to new places, you kind of you gain that, I guess, larger branch of people to work with. So I find that moving to different locations there adds to collaboration. But then when we went to online, it was in a sense a bit easier because you didn't have to have that physical location, the gathering of bodies. It was so much easier just to pop up on Zoom. But you do miss that element of a shared space.
And what, either in that shared space, in person or online, in your view, makes for a good or even a great reading?
Well, I always say that when you're at a reading, there's an energy that comes in the room. And there's more of that personal element that you have with somebody face to face. And then there's the kind of the beforehand mingling that you can do with people, the social kind of interactions that happen even before the readings begin. And then when they're over, there's also kind of that, hey, maybe we could go down the street and, get a bite to eat or something like that. So I think that's missing in a huge element in Zoom, where you get a personal contact point. And I think in Zoom, that's definitely that element is missing.
Mm-hmm. And when a poet is at the microphone, or at any rate presenting their work before an audience, I wonder what it is that, if there is anything identifiable that connects those poets whose readings seem to have a certain gravity, or which come across and move the audience more effectively. Is there any one thing or two things perhaps that poets do that that makes for an effective reading?
Well, I think that some of the best readings are that kind of impromptu. I mean, with any sort of live event, right? That spontaneous maybe story that before the maybe even a poet begins, they might give a backstory. And I think that's something that you go to a reading, you can pick up a book and you can find that connection in the words. But when you go to a reading and you connect with the author, you kind of get this little insight into maybe why that was written or what they wrote. So you kind of get a little bit of that backstory. And those personal connections, I think really kind of draw you into the reading. And I think when you're in a live audience, something might trigger one of those stories, right? So I think that might be, or maybe there's more of a connection with the crowd because there might be even more of that conversational element within if it's a small reading, and that sparks maybe into a story, and then that feeds into their work.
So for poets or writers who might approach a reading series hoping to read through them and to offer their work to the audience provided by that reading series, I wonder what you'd recommend to those writers to make them easier to book or to work with through correspondence, say, or by other means. What is it that you'd say makes a writer easier to work with?
Well, previous to it being on Zoom, so because we were able to go on Zoom, it was really easy to just email a face that I'd never met before, right? And say, you want to come? And then they send an email, sure. And so that interaction is actually a lot easier on the online platform. But with that kind of comes that you don't get the personal interactions that you would say you booked somebody and they come down and you maybe meet them before the reading and you have that kind of more of a conversation. That in that element, you get more of a personal connection with the author first. And then, when they go and they do the reading, it's, I guess, that kind of easy to get along with personality is probably the easier kind of writer to work with. But it's accessibility too. Getting someone on an airplane and getting them here, that's makes it a little bit harder to work with artists when they're outside of a drivable region to your reading series, right?
So you mentioned, yeah, the difficulty of facilitating travel, and I guess if people are coming from far enough away, you might potentially put them up. I wonder what
Yeah.
is the most challenging component of running a reading series, and also what do you find to be the easiest?
I'm super good at connecting. So I like that's kind of my element that I add is I can you know connect with people really well. So that's probably the easiest. The hardest, I mean, I think everybody's going to have this answer is money, right? So if you want to try to get funds to try to get people out here, it adds up. And so trying to resource avenues for that is always the hardest.
Mhm. I wonder, perhaps you're not as calculating as this, but I wonder whether there are any like tips or tricks that you might offer to the often introverted poets in the audience who would like to, and it seems like people are enjoying connecting with people, but they're just not quite sure exactly how.
Yeah, it's, I find Facebook, I know social media, I hate social media, but it's also a great tool. And, I find that my enjoyment from the reading series, and I'm not a writer, so I married one. So I think that for me, I like the element of connection. Um, and then as an engager of literature, that you get a further insight into the lives of these writers, right? Um, and I think as a business, so if you're an introverted poet, um, there's the practice of writing, then there's the business of writing. And the business of writing, really, especially with poetry, is the performance aspect of it, right? And the selling of yourselves, and the you really do have to kind of put a lot of yourself out there,
Mm,
which I think with the territory of being introverted, um, would be difficult. Yeah, there's a performative aspect of it, I think, um, when it comes to poetry.
mhm. Yeah, it certainly feels like the sort of self-promotional component that one must cultivate in one's personality in order to be a professional. I'm not sure if it's such a thing, professional writer, is different from the place that the work comes from, which is tends to be sort of broody and reflective and introspective and maybe terrified by neighbors and that sort of thing. But the two separate components. At any rate,
Yeah.
I wonder whether you'd say a few words about your thinking through land acknowledgements in your position as a host, perhaps with specific regard to the Three Fires Confederacy and your prefatory recognition of the three nations that call Wawiautunong home at the beginning of each By the River reading.
Yeah. So my husband's Lenape First Nation, and so a reflection of place, I think, becomes a very important aspect. Um, in the sense that even as a First Nation resident, Wawiautunong is actually a place where Lenape originally would not have been. So
Mhm.
acknowledgement of that history and the people that resided here, I think, is an important notion that we give thought and we give reflection to that. Um, I am a environmentalist, I'm a biologist, and so place and ecosystem to me is a very important aspect of my way of thinking. And so, in my thought, it's claim to the land, it's claim to its history, and a reflection to make sure that we're aware, um, especially if we are bringing people in from all over, right? We can use that as a reflection of each person's home and each person's history.
Mhm. Um, I'm wondering, with a sort of impromptu question, whether you find analogies for what it is that people do when they come together to share stories in like non-human species, whether there's some kind of like group grooming or something like this, or instances in the non-human biological world that in some way mirror whatever it is fundamentally that's going on when people come together to share stories.
Yeah, it's an interesting, yeah, because I think that when we talk, or when we tell a story, we intrinsically always carry with us our connection to the land, and or in some sense people have that disconnect to the land, and maybe that's their writing, and so I think we carry with us these stories, and there's a commonality when we get together, that we can kind of say, oh, you know, that story reflects in you know, this history that I have, or and then there is kind of a sense of like a temporary migration with it, right? Like you're traveling from one space to another. I always find it fascinating driving by car. You don't get it by plane, but when you drive across the country by car, it's sometimes almost like these really strong lines of ecological change. You know, maybe it's a river that's cut through, or the mountains have come, and you find these like almost distinct habitats as you're driving. And so I think for bringing those stories, it's almost as if you're carving through the landscape and kind of bringing all those pockets with you. And then you come together and you reflect those stories, which is pretty cool to think about. That you know, it's more than just a gathering; it's a bringing of the, you know, continent to and sharing it. Right? It was kind of a cool way to think.
Wonderful. I wonder, you'd mentioned a little bit about the transition online, but I wonder what that transition has been like for you, and whether you foresee it continuing beyond, if this pandemic concludes, the conclusion of the pandemic. What that move has felt like and been like for you, for By the River.
Well, so last year it kind of just felt like, oh, we got to put these reading series together, right? So we booked people, and you know, we rammed it through Zoom, and there was a lot of growing pains for me, because technology is not my thing. I would rather have the gathering, but with that came, I guess, a better a bigger branch out to more people outside of Windsor and further. But would I continue Zoom? No. I would prefer to have live readings. The only positive I can say that we've come out of this is a recorded element. And so what we've chosen to do is, after each reading, we publish a YouTube video. So we edit and that's been really nice, because after the reading, you've got kind of a catalog or an archive of the reading. So I would continue that, only it would be a recording of the live event. So that element, I think, is been a good benefit with the online.
Great. And just as we conclude here, I wonder what events By the River Reading Series has coming up, and to which we could direct our audience's attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So so we meet every month. So September the 15th is our first reading. It's every Wednesday, or the third Wednesday of the month. And we will be having Marty Gervais and Sabayachi Na. So they will be for that September 15th. It's 7 o'clock live with Zoom, and then the event will be recorded. But we have a huge lineup of people. So I think you said 17 earlier in the interview. So that would mean that these would all be turned into and cataloged on YouTube. So you can come see them live, once a month or cataloged on YouTube. So it's the By the River YouTube, By the River website, Facebook, any of those. And we have a fantastic promo video out there that lists all the artists that we have coming.
Tremendous. All right, this has been episode 2 of Talking with the Organizers with By the River Reading Series Board President, Emily Lockhart. Emily, thank you so much for your insight and generosity and conversation.
Kevin. And we'll look forward to you too, right? So we have you coming in April. So
looking forward to it.
yes. All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.